because spirituality became my anchor. Finally, something made sense in my life. The more I did the work, faced the demons. So when we step into the mature feminine, we're accountable, we're charming and quirky. There's 3 ways to build a business. Get a loan, get an investor, or everything that you earn goes straight back into your business. Where you spend your money is a soul choice between you and your soul. And if your soul is guiding you to invest in this mentor or in this business, then that is your purpose and your calling.
If I told you that a former strip club dancer who once spiraled into addiction would one day become a self made millionaire, a leader in intuitive healing, and a mentor to thousands, would you believe me? My question is, why not? We have the power to change our narrative and our life story. Meet Hannah Andrews, the woman who turned rock bottom into launchpad, from drug addiction to spiritual awakening, from financial struggle to a millionaire status. Her journey isn't about healing, it's about radical transformation, breaking generation cycles, and rewriting the script on abundance and feminine power. In this episode, we will unravel the myths of manifestation, expose the truths about spiritual industry, and uncover how Hannah went from chaos to clarity, proving that sometimes hitting rock bottom is the best thing that can happen to you. Buckle up because this is a conversation you don't want to miss. This is the Desai Show. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Brisbane, Australia.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Hannah, people see the success, the wealth, the transformation, but let's rewind a bit. You went from dancing in a strip club and battling addiction to leading thousands in intuitive healing. And that's not a normal transition for many. What was the catalyst that really shifted your reality?
Definitely a broken heart. I think a lot of people hear strip club and sort of roll their eyes, and the reality is that I was a happy hardcore raver who was into a lot of drugs at that time. I was in my party heydays of the 18 to 21 and raving every weekend, going to work on Monday and doing it all again the next weekend, and that was my life. It's like I knew what time of year it was because what festival or DJ was playing. So at that point in time, I was definitely finding my way. The only reason I ended up working in a strip club because it was fast money to get me overseas to go with my boyfriend who had started his traveling journey. We hadn't been together that long, but I saw it as a way for me to change my reality, get out of Australia and travel the world. And it seems every time over my now 40 years that I've tried to travel the world, the universe is like, nope, you need to stay here. Because the second time that happened in my life, I found out I was pregnant and I was about to go to Burning Man in the US. And I was like, okay, I'm meant to stay here again. So when I was 21, and 21 is one of the spiritual awakening points. It's a conscious awakening point. So I work a lot with people on timeline and specifically based through the Steiner philosophy and there's certain age points in our life that we go through that we hit these ages and they're like a make or break. They are a literal wake up point for us. And the 3 to 4 years leading up to that point can be really hard, it's like death warmed up. And a lot of people think they're having a breakdown, but the breakdown is the breakthrough. So I ended up working in a strip club. I was only there for 10 weeks and I wasn't allowed to take my G-string off. They weren't allowed to touch me, so that was fine with me. Ended up being the top club earner because somehow learned to make a lot of money doing anything. And that's a bit of a wealth code there that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. So it wasn't that long me working there. We ended up breaking up and that was death warmed up for me. I woke up in that moment going, I'm not sure, what am I doing? Like, I'm working in a strip club. I'm smoking crack, smoking ice before I go to the strip club. Like, I was a mess, absolute mess. And my lady that lived next door at the time, she was like a spiritual grandma, like one of those soul connections. And not that I was very conscious at that time, but I look at it now was like a guardian angel. I remember going to a house and seeing a friend do cards. I went over there, absolute wreck, and I was like, I need your friend to do a reading for me. And she's like, looked at me, grabbed her deck of cards, and she's like, here, do it yourself. And sent me home, and I'm like, oh. And so I went home, opened the little deck and read the instructions and then pulled the cards and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And just everything opened up from there. in the strip club, you have to find stuff to talk about to, the customers, to the men. And there was a man I was talking to and telling him about the cards, and he's like, "Oh, I've got a book that you might want to read." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, whatever." Anyway, he brought it in and handed it to me. I almost fell over. It was the same author as the cards, and I was like,
Oh my gosh.
I took the book home and I bawled my eyes out crying the whole time I read it. I was like, "This is like," and nothing up until that point had ever made sense, had ever had any sort of resonance whatsoever. And so, the book was The Lightworker's Way by Doreen Virtue. And she'd mentioned Louise Hay and Wayne Dwyer. And because I was earning a lot of money at the time, I just went and spent all this money at the spiritual shop and bought every single book, deck, and everything that she'd mentioned in the book. And there was a lot of resonance. The Mermaids and Dolphins Oracle was the first deck. And I gave the deck back to my spiritual grandma. I'm going to call her. And the book really hit home. I was crying. Everything started to make sense in my life. But the book that really shifted everything for me was Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And that really shifted a lot for people. But from having my whole wall covered in rave posters and festival posters, then a few months later, pulling them all down, for some reason I had all these little note cards, and I wrote all these affirmations out of Louise Hay's book, and I put them all over my wall. I quit the strip club, and everybody's like, "What are you on?" Like, last 2 weeks I was there, I'm like, "I'm high on life," and they're like, "Nah." I just quit everything like that because finally something made sense.
Yeah.
It was probably about 9 months, then just sort of dripping off everything. Why it was so easy for me to let go of it is because spirituality became my anchor. Finally, something made sense in my life. I had something to hang on to, an anchor in my life. And that turned a career in this spiritual work. I ended up doing a 12-month training, which is what I teach in trust intuition.
Right.
And the more I did the work, faced the demons, did the inner child healing, cleared the childhood trauma, the more
Yeah.
psychic I became.
Yeah. That's incredible. Like the universe just helped you align with your soul and your mind, and you just landed where you actually belong, which is such an incredible story. Studies show that 90% of people who experience rock bottom moments stay stuck in their cycles, but you are part of that rare 10% who use pain as the fuel and do something about it. Hannah, people think manifesting is sitting around visualizing checks in the mail. Many are intrigued by the concept of manifestation, but they remain skeptical. And I have been there, done that. How did you harness the law of attraction to not only envision, but actualize your millionaire status?
It is literally doing the inner work. It's, as you say, people visualize checks in the mail. Our subconscious is like 70 to 90%, just like our in our body. And our conscious is like the 10 to 30%. So if you're like visualizing checks in the mail, but what about this 90% here? Like that's where the weight is. And if you're not consciously, consistently doing the work, the inner work that needs to shift for those checks to become real in the mail, because a lot of people try for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a few months, even a few years, and like it doesn't work, and then they give up.
I love that. There was a story that I wanted to share the audience about Jack Canfield. He's an American author and motivational speaker. He's the co-author of the Chicken Soup for Soul series, which has more than 250 titles and 500 million copies printed in probably over 40 languages. He actually attributes his first $1 million to the deliberate practice of the law of attraction. There are so many stories like that. If you hear any leader stories, there would be something they're manifesting and they're talking about it. It's the belief system. And like you said, the inner work is so crucial. And I'm so grateful that you actually pursue that and teach your students. They say smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. Your voyage through the tumultuous waters of this industry must have been very enlightening. The transformation healing industry is vast and varied, Hannah. What unexpected challenges did you encounter while establishing yourself? And then tell the audience, how did you navigate them?
Almost want to say everything that could go wrong did. And the part, and just talking about how did you use the law of attraction, and the part where people give up is the breakthrough, is the test.
Mhm.
That's where people give up. And so when we're really looking at moving through those pieces, it's
Mhm.
tools that you've learned to be able to, bust through those things. Because as you said, we can believe it, but if our subconscious has stronger beliefs from the childhood wounding or past lives or anything like that, that holds greater weight in there. And so it's that needs to be overcome.
Hannah, do you have the intuitiveness when you look at a person and feel something for them, against them? How do you actually navigate those realities? I would love to hear that from you.
One simple word to explain it all would be boundaries. So a lot of people, when they open their spiritual faculties, or maybe they just, naturally can feel everything, we're all sentient beings, right? And those are muscles. And if you don't learn to control the muscles, understand that muscle, build that muscle, then you will just absorb it all like a sponge, and it can be really overwhelming. And so when you ask me, or when you look at someone, do you just see things or know things about them or feel stuff? And I'm like, actually, no, I don't. But if I think back to my beginning days, yeah, I felt everything. And it's training your intuitive gift to have those solid boundaries, to not have the dark spirit sitting on the end of the bed when you wake up in the morning staring at you in your face. Like that's called boundaries, right? You wouldn't just let a stranger off the street into your house. Same with the spirit world. And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong, and they don't understand these boundaries in the etheric world, in your own energy. It's the same thing as, when I look at somebody, no, I don't get messages because I've trained myself to not just take on everybody's stuff. That would be
Yeah.
overwhelming.
That'll be like negativity pondering all over you because you probably gain more negativity from the other person than the positivity. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to move on in learning a little more about demystifying the healing industry because studies show that the self help industry in itself is over $13 billion. And yet, many people feel lost. The healing industry often operates in the shadows of mainstream awareness. Can you unveil some lesser known facts that practitioners and clients should be aware of?
Definitely understanding who you're working with. There's a lot of pillars out there, but it really is about what is their background, what is their training, and what is their history. So,
Mm.
as I always say, like, anybody can pick up a deck of cards and learn how to read, but what happens when your client's on the verge of a breakdown and they come to see you for a reading and they finally feel safe, and then it all just opens like Pandora's box. Now, if that person only knows how to read cards and not knows how to deal with trauma, then that's where it gets a little bit messy.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with the rise of the alternative healing practices, there's been an influx of self proclaimed gurus and frauds. And we see that on Netflix all the time. And how can individuals really discern genuine healers from those who may exploit the vulnerable?
As much as we need to be aware, it's part of our journey of discernment. And
I
I'm
like that.
really contradictory saying that. At the end of the day, whenever we're learning anything, we're going to make mistakes. The
Yes.
biggest investments that I've made have been my greatest lessons and the hardest lessons. And sometimes people might say they're a mistake, but they're the things that taught me how to become one of the best healers in the world.
Oh, amazing.
And so it's really about obviously doing your research, right? There's a lot of scammer bots on, social media these days, and people do get scammed. It's sort of general discernment. It's the same thing. You wouldn't let somebody off the streets randomly into your. Why are you doing it on your social media? Somebody randomly shows up in your inbox. Hey, here's my credit card. Give me your credit card details. I'm like this little bit of a red flag. So it's common sense. But because everybody is so caught up, because they don't have the tools to deal with their emotions, they're dealing with the husband, the wives, the kids, and they're busy and they're stressed and work. Our society is in chaos. It is very easy to get pulled into something like that. So it is when you are choosing to work with a healer or a psychic, they say, cool, I really feel a resonance with this person. This really excites me. Something is lighting me up here. Let me just do a little bit of research, ask a few more questions, because then you'll soon very discern if
Yeah.
something's genuine or not. Because when you start asking questions, the real people will be able to answer them, and the wrong people will start being abusive too, more than likely.
Yeah, absolutely. You very beautifully connected the dots for me I used to question my journey. I had a very interesting and a very long journey. When I turned 40 2 years back, is when I actually understood what I need to do in life. But now I have a story and I've become a storyteller, not just through this podcast. And I'm also a mindset coach. So I work with a lot of moms to train their mindset towards the perspective of life. And you won't believe, but I'm able to connect with pretty much every single mom out there. It sounds so stupid, but I mean, yes, I have been there, done that, faced all of the traumas and the troubles and the discernment and the sadness, and have become so resilient. And you're exactly right. Like, whatever we are going through right now, or we have gone through, is basically supposed to create that story for our life, for a future life. At that time, you might be not able to understand, but you will realize you are moving forward to share that story with the world one day. You talk about moving from the immature feminine to the mature feminine. And a lot of women chase success, relationships, luxury, thinking it will fill a void. And but there is a deeper truth to that feminine power. Hannah, what is it?
It's definitely the immature to the mature feminine, and it is a level of consciousness. And that is why when you ask me, how do we discern the fake gurus from the nod, we can get a really genuine mentor guru. I don't like using that word, but a really genuine teacher. And we can accuse them of being fake, narcissistic, throw anything at them. And that is really your immature feminine or masculine, depending on who you're talking with. What's actually happening is you're being triggered into your mature feminine, but it takes that inner work, piecing those dark shadows and inner child woundings to be able to grow through that. And that is a consciousness, I want to say level. I don't like using the word level because it can be very judgmental, but for ease of explaining, it is a consciousness level. And sometimes people never move past those levels, and sometimes people do. It takes 20 years for a human being to actually change on a psychological level. Like, that's the time frame it actually takes. People say, yeah, we can change faster. And I'm like, yeah, we can. And also it takes 20 years. So when you're like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this happening? I'm like, it is. It takes time.
Hmm.
It takes time only if you're doing the work consistently. Time doesn't heal all wounds on its own. It just shifts it further into the unconscious, and then one day it'll surface because we can't keep that down forever. So the immature feminine to the mature feminine, I'm sure there's lots of bodies of work out there, but I really love Andrew Barnes. He has books and trainings, and he has the relationship map that really explains the masculine, feminine, the mature feminine, and all his body of work. I really, really love that. So for an example, the immature feminine avoids responsibility, lazy, seeks validation, superficially friendly, fears abandonment, jealous, feels unlovable and powerless. So you could look at the immature aspects as the unconscious behaviors that are running the show. That is your consciousness. And so when we heal those inner wounds, we become, say, the mature feminine. We learn to love ourselves in the deepest way because we've healed those wounds. Otherwise, they will run our life. So when we step into the mature feminine, we're accountable, we're charming and quirky, we're loyal, we're accepting of what is, we're interdependent, pleasureful, blissful, graceful, we're honest and vulnerable, empathetic and tender. So the immature feminine will gossip, be passive aggressive, blames others, backstabs, all those sort of gossipy group things that seems like we're in high school is very much those unconscious, aspects running the show in our consciousness. And this is where when you ask me, how do we discern the fake gurus from the authentic gurus? It's like, well, is it, or if you're going to go to some boot camp with someone who pretend like printed their certificate off the internet, you want to be careful with that shit, okay? But if they're a genuine trained facilitator and have a really lot of good reviews, and you get really triggered, before you start projecting your unconscious wounds onto them, you want to look at, what is this triggering in me? Is this me being afraid to step into my power? Is this a path that I need to walk, being a leader of some sort? Because usually it is. And am I afraid to actually shine like that? Because when I was a child, I was neglected and abandoned and had to fend for myself my whole life. So there's lots of variations when we're looking at the fake gurus, the good gurus, the our own projections, our own triggers, our own woundings to really make a mature decision about what's actually going on.
Wow, that was so powerful. I learned so much. I would love for all of you to rewind, play, pause, because this was really, really very interesting. And even for me to know that a person, a human being, take 20 years, that's big number. Like I had no clue about that. And it's very intense and this is wonderful. I was also thinking the journey of Madam C.J. Walker, for anyone who doesn't know. She was America's first self made female millionaire, as per the Guinness Book of World Records. She transformed personal challenges into a thriving business by developing and marketing a line of cosmetics and hair care products for Black women, exemplifying mature feminine leadership. And this is probably in 50s, those 1960s. Her life journey was very similar, adding, a little more value to that example for the feminine leadership. I want to move and talk to you about some of the hardest truth. You walked away from your own family, raised your daughter alone, fought through the court system, and built an empire while stepping off a single parent pension. What's something about this journey that no one sees?
Probably the amount of tears behind the scenes. Where do we start with that? I want to say the scientific and psychological evidence of how hard it is and the fallout of the psychological fallout even of walking away from a family system. It's a deep primal survival instinctual level to stay in the family system, and that's why a lot of people don't chase their dreams. That's why a lot of people don't step into the leadership, and that's why they sit there in the immature feminine or masculine judge and project, because they're so attached to the family system. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone has to walk away from the family system, but it's the inner work that allows you to live your life and still have a healthy relationship with your family system if it is not, if it's a healthy system in the relationship, for example. So the amount of tears behind the scenes would probably be the biggest thing. If you watch any of my earlier videos throughout my website, there is definitely times where I've been on video crying about how hard that is, and it's still true today. There's no amount of inner work that can be done that will fix that hole of what that family connection can actually do. And whilst it's not my whole family, I definitely still have a good relationship with my dad, even though we've had our times over the years, and my brother and a couple other family members. Definitely, it's not everybody, but it is those sort of core pieces that really, I guess, cut me. And it was a really hard choice back in 2018, 2019 for the 2 years building my business online. I would constantly hear, like, why are you doing this psychic shit? Stop doing that. Like, there was just constant put downs. And then as soon as I made 100K in 5 months, I never heard from them again. And whilst all those put downs stopped, I chose to stop contacting them at a point. So I stopped making the phone calls, and I was like, oh, we'll just see if they reach out to me. And they didn't. And that was really a big shock to my system. That was probably the hardest part of my journey. Is like the thing that saved me, got me off drugs, that made me live a normal-ish life. I've got a moon on my face, but hello. That I probably would be dead in a gutter somewhere, that I now have turned into a career because it's so in alignment for me, to then lose my family for not just who I am, but also my career is everything. So yeah, it's probably the tears behind the scenes, even though, I definitely cried on camera before and what have you. I think when we were discussing the immature to mature feminine, if you look back on my earlier work throughout my website, that was me very much in my immature feminine, if you may, in not understanding the depth of my projections and the way that I was maybe going about certain relationships, or the way that I was dealing with it. And whilst I helped a lot of people and shared very vulnerably online and in a really real and raw way, over time that became draining. And it was like, how can I share my message, not my mess? And it was this process of really pulling back for several years in the last few years of just everything and not sharing anything. And definitely it has been very isolating. I moved out into 250 acres, which is also very isolating. It was like I've been through this big initiation in how do I share the core teachings that are actually going to help people shift and rise without sharing all of my trauma drama that is not necessary. There's ways to shift from the immature feminine to the mature feminine. Was me really stepping into my leadership, me healing my relationship with authority and my power. Because when someone steps into their power, into your power, it triggers all the times that you were disempowered. It triggers all the times that you were abused.
Right.
And so when we step into that leadership role, that's why all the projections come up. That's why people who are chasing their dreams are in their power. And that's why it triggers a lot of people and will get called narcissistic. And maybe in your immature, unconscious self, everybody's
Mhm.
narcissistic. Because the truth about narcissism is it's unhealed wounds projected.
Correct. Wow. That's
Unconscious,
just incredible.
pure
Yes.
unconsciousness.
Yeah, and we actually ignore the signs of narcissism a lot in today's world. I know somebody who has been experiencing narcissism at home from his own wife, and when I confronted him that, do you know, I'm sorry to say that you're living with a narcissist woman, and he went into the shock of his life because I actually broke down in pieces what narcissists do, and he couldn't believe it. So men also tolerate narcissism. It's not just the women always.
Just the men, no, definitely not. If you go back through my old videos, you'll see something along the lines of single dads. I've got a message for you, and it was my apology to the men on behalf of women for my own wake up. I want to say all humans go through to an extent, and I made a public apology on behalf of all women who've been unconscious. If there's a man listening and is going through that, that video would be really healing for them to watch. The reason society is so messed up is because we have lost the rites of passage growing up. You know, a child starts to mature from 8 years of age, and sometimes for boys going into men, it's a little bit older, but the hormones in the body start changing at that age. In the tribal days, and still today, there's still tribes around, that's the age that they start turning into men. They're days that they're the ages from 8 to 14. They start going through the rituals, the rites of passage. They go out into the bush on their own with the men or the women. And today's society, we're not seen as an adult until we're 18 to 21. No wonder there's 50-year-olds running around in a 50-year-old body, but they're 18 in their head. Do you know what I mean? Like in maturity, because we've missed that crucial
Yeah.
element that's missing in society. And this is where I'm really passionate about teaching people consciousness as adults, because then they can use that with their children and we raise a whole different generation.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And
Now that
so people think empowerment is this glamorous Instagram worthy transformation, but the reality, it's walking through hell and coming out on the other side. What's the rawest moment you've had that no one knows about?
probably, I don't know, there is one to be honest, because I have shared a lot. Working in a strip club's pretty rare. It's pretty raw and real. Being what's it, ostracized from family, you know, unless you've walked through that, you don't really understand the extent of that core pain that you feel that doesn't really go away. You can definitely heal and grieve from it. You know, there's more and more gaps and the longer gaps of living life before it sort of hits you again. And that's how healing happens. I guess recently is just like the shift from, you know, 39 to 40 and the hormonal changes that, you know, going
Right.
through has been a really big wake up. And you know, I think that helps with maturity a lot as well. And
Yeah, according to Forbes, it's 68% of self-made women millionaires had no financial education. They learned by doing and by failing. And you made your first million after you went through addiction on your own terms. Was there any unconventional money move you made that no one teaches in business school but actually works?
probably investing with the right mentor that is
Love
living
that.
and resonates with what you know is in alignment for your soul's path. Like when I invested was probably 80K with my mentor at the time, I was making 3K a month. That doesn't make sense. And I didn't tell anyone. I was so nervous. Like, I told my best friend only because she had done something similar, but I didn't even know at the time. She's like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "I just signed up to, you know, my mentor." And she said, "I don't want to tell anyone." She's like, "Oh, well," and she shared her story. And she's like, "I get it. I didn't tell anyone either." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And that's the thing where a lot of people, that are still really connected with their family system, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the ones who then project onto the ones who are living what they want to live. That's where the issue is, We're telling them to stop. It's only because it's, frightening them. Like, they're the ones that would never understand that concept. And there's a lot of people who have no financial literacy. They go on and learn it and become millionaires. It's because they've invested in themselves. A lot of people excuse it's too much, or I don't have that money. And I'm like, I never had 80 grand when I started with my mentor either. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was on 3 grand a month, but I knew that if I invested in someone who's way ahead of me doing what I want to do,
Right.
I knew that I would learn the fastest route. And I did in every level. I would not be where I am today in business, in my skill set, in all of that if I did not invest in her.
And that is so true. You hear that from Warren Buffett as well. You need to invest to grow. I love to tell stories. So, Vicky D. Ormond was working in a publishing field of expertise and felt this pull to do something bigger. And one night, with barely any money in her account, she took a chance and bought a domain name she believed had power. A lot of you might resonate and remember this story, but she maxed out her credit card to buy it. No investors, no plans, just a gut feeling. Everyone told she was being reckless, but she held on. Fast forward, she built an entire movement around that brand because that domain became the foundation of her business, her community, her legacy. And the credit card debt paid off probably 100 times over. So that brings me to this, Hannah. What's your Wiki the Armand moment, that one financial risk that could have wrecked you but ended up changing everything? And I guess you just answered that question for us, but was there anything else beyond your mentor?
Definitely. There was many times that, and something that's really come to light lately, I was, flow talking, and purpose isn't something that you figure out. It's something that you follow. A lot of people come to me and they're like, what's my purpose? And they don't figure it out after like 3 days. And they're like, that didn't work. And there's all the projection wounds coming up. And this is why there's all the gossip and all the shit in all the industries, because people are not owning their stuff, let alone doing the actual work that's going to make them the millionaire. It was probably in the first 2 years, I'm just doing my thing, following each step, follow the next step. Life purpose rules. Obviously, listening to a lot of mentors before I actually signed up to them. And one of them had said something, there's 3 ways to build your business. Get a loan, get an investor, or everything that you earn goes straight back into your business. And I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing. But I didn't even realize that I was. And it's still true today, right? There's a lot of times where people are like, do this with your money, do this with your money. And I've put it straight back into my business. A lot of people would be like, don't buy a car, don't do this. As a single mum coming off pension, the car was the investment for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like a year later, the whole world went into lockdown. And yet with that car, I was able to road trip for 5 months, not being in lockdown, because there was no way I was being locked down in suburbia, which then allowed us to land and live where we are now on 250 acres. And without that car, that wouldn't have happened. So when people are telling you when to invest your money, it's the same as the spirit world. You wouldn't just let a stranger walk into your house. You wouldn't just let a spirit walk into your house. There's boundaries. That's a training. That's a discernment. Where you spend your money is a soul choice between you and your soul. And if your soul is guiding you to invest in this mentor or in this business, then that is your purpose and your calling. And if you listen to that, you will unravel the path of your purpose. And so there's stages of evolution through your business, through your consciousness journey, through spirituality, through relationships, through your own life. And this is where the journey is the destination. We start to understand that concept because it's every decision that you make every day that's going to lead you either in this path or this path.
Wow, that was incredible. Hannah, before we wrap up this segment and move on to the final one, firstly, I love the tattoo on your face. Do you want to tell the importance of that to the audience? It's very attractive, by the way.
Thank you. It's funny because a lot of people ask me, it doesn't have a direct meaning. Oh, I'm a healer. So the crescent moon specifically, for me, has deep resonance with the priestesses of Avalon. And that's the same with the druid snake on my arm, and specifically the 3 bands for the druidry. And the stars, the line, it wasn't like, oh, I want to be like a priestess and I saw it on a picture and I want to get that. I got the face tattoos in like January 2021. And the only reason I did it was because all my tattoos have come from meditation, seeing visuals, things have happened in the meditations, and I'll feel it on my body, like, sort of be like always jolted, or be like, usually like several months before I go and get the tattoo. This one, actually, the whole face system came through in a full moon ceremony that I was holding. And then all of a sudden, I just sore felt. And after the ceremony, we have like a debrief and we chat. And one of my students was like, "Oh, Hannah, when we sat down, I saw the like crescent moon and line on your chin." And I was like, "I saw that too."
My gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I didn't say anything. I wasn't planning to. And she was the first one that brought it up. And I was like, okay. And then it was probably about 6 months before I went and had this done on.
Got goosebumps. Wow. What a story. That was incredible to have like two people think the same way in the most positive setting that you can think of. So there's nothing better than that. Hannah, you were so amazing. I hope we were able to reveal and open a lot of this journey about spirituality to our audience. We had a very little time to talk about it, but if you want to know more about Hannah's journey, she's out there on Instagram. Her inner work critic is something that you should consider taking in forward. But before we wrap up, Hannah, I do this incredible fun segment, which is called the rapid fire. Ready? All right. What's one belief you held at the start of your journey that you've since abandoned?
That I'm better than everyone.
If you could manifest anything instantly, what would it be?
Love.
Share a surprising fact about yourself that most people wouldn't guess.
I am a honey fiend. Give me honey and I'm happy.
Oh, wow. What's the most unconventional healing practice you've tried and did it work?
I don't know what that would be. I haven't really tried much. I've done what works for me, and I don't feel called to, like, plant medicine, for example. It comes in and out, and I'm just like, oh, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And then I hear people's stories, like this one woman was walking back to the camp with everyone, and she could see through all the realms, and where she came and sat down with everyone, and I'm like, isn't that normal for you in your day-to-day life? And it was a big wake-up call for me. And I'm like, anybody can train their faculties, like an athlete trains with trainers to become a pro.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. You don't need a substance to do and open your faculties. You can
Right.
train your gift without that. So I've never done it.
In one word, what drives you?
Probably purpose.
And the last question, maybe controversial, what's the biggest lie people are being sold about manifestation and abundance?
That it happens overnight.
Love that. Hannah, thank you so much for your raw truth, your wisdom, and for shaking up everything we thought we knew. To everyone listening, what if your biggest setback is actually your greatest setup? Let this be a sign to stop playing small and start stepping into the power you were meant for. This episode isn't just about Hannah's story, it's about the mindset shift that takes you from an average person to an exceptional person. If you got value from this, subscribe, share, and let's keep rewriting the rules of success. Signing off from the Desai show, where the boldest minds reveal the biggest success secrets. Thank you.